video, we're going to talk about, trying to help other drivers, trying to help other owner operators. It's difficult because people have so much misinformation. They don't know. They don't know what to believe. you know, this was certainly the case when I started. It's confusing as hell. It's like everybody's got an opinion, and all their opinions contradict one another. And you read news articles that says, the trucking industry is going down, and then other articles saying that it's a great time to get into trucking, and it can make your head spin. It really can. And it's certainly that way when you first buy your truck. There's so much information. There's almost too much information. And then there's people that have beliefs that they believe something so strongly that you cannot convince them otherwise. They'll buy a terrible piece of equipment. They'll buy a truck with 800,000 miles and think they're going to be successful. And they'll start with no money. And it's like you realize, you're automatically going to fail. But they don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know that's a bad thing to do. As far as they know, they got a good deal. But here's the thing: you can't fix stupid. Some people are stupid, and the only way they're going to learn is from their own experiences. And it's not, it's not something that they can't fix, but I think because there's so much overwhelming information out there, you know, they don't believe anybody about anything, So keep this in mind when you're trying to help other owner operators, is that, they've heard a lot of different perspectives. You know, they've heard horror stories, they've heard success stories, they've heard, rumors and gossip and all this stuff, but they haven't experienced it yet. So as a result, they may start out making stupid decisions, but you can't stop them from making those decisions. I mean, they had it in their mind that they're right, and only time will tell. Only time will tell. When they buy that truck and they fall flat on their face, that's when the learning begins. When you're broke down on the side of the road, that's when learning begins. It intensifies. It makes you focus so much. You got to solve a problem. You got a major problem on your hand with that piece of equipment, and that's when you're going to learn. Other owner operators could tell you a million times, the importance of having that warranty. You won't realize that until you're broke down on the side of the road, and then you get towed to Freightliner, and then it's going to hit you. It's going to hit you massively. If you didn't realize it before, now you will. So for some people, they have to see it to believe it. It's like they don't know who to believe when it comes to being an owner operator, because you look on YouTube, you look on Facebook, there's a wide spectrum, a wide variety. Some people are successful, other people are not, and this creates a lot of confusion, and maybe the new owner operator is overconfident, things like this. But the thing is that I don't fault them for not believing other owner operators, because I've been there. I've been there when guys told me, to sell my truck, buy another truck. And I kept my truck, even though it had high miles, kept putting money in it, and in some ways I was like this, stubborn as can be, not going to give up on that truck, and there's nothing any owner operator could tell me to change my mind. They could talk to their blue in the face. wasn't going to matter. I was convinced that I had the technical skills to keep that truck on the road. And I didn't. That was the thing. I mean, it wasn't from a lack of effort or a lack of skills. It's just that the truck that I had, the year that it was a 2012, it was early on when the EPA requirements came into the industry. It's one of the first makes and models that came out with DEF, and expensive, poorly designed, did not have durability. So I think those Cascadia 125 models are just bad years, bad trucks. But I probably was overconfident in my ability to keep it on the road. And this comes back to the stupid shall be punished. It's something you have to learn through experience. Um, I know. I listened to all the other owner operators had 10 more years experience than I did, but I didn't believe them. Because again, there's so much misinformation out there that you don't know what to believe. And it's like, I'll believe it when I see it, and then I saw it, and then I believed it. So when you have a breakdown that's $10,000 and it's not under warranty, you become a believer real fast. And it happened multiple times. That truck, I probably I probably sunk $50,000 into that truck trying to keep it running. So for some guys, they have to see it to believe it. It's just the way it is. You can't convince them otherwise. And it may be that they're not stupid, but they just don't know who to believe. And this is the importance of networking with other owner operators that you somewhat trust. It's like you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you do have to find good owner operators to learn from. You have to have somebody who's already been there, done that, who can guide you to avoid the big mistakes. It's okay to have a little bit of trial and error if it's not very expensive, but when you're making $10,000 mistakes, could that have been avoidable had you found a good owner operator who can help you uh, get you going when you first start out? Because as a rookie owner operator, I can tell you your head is probably spinning. You're just overwhelmed by the amount of information and people's opinion, and you don't know a good owner operator from a bad owner operator, and as a result, you just kind of feel your own way through it, and you may make costly mistakes. That it's not because you're stupid, it's just because you have lack of experience. You don't, like I've often said in previous videos, you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know who to believe. So some people are stubborn, and the only way they're going to learn is when they start paying for it. That when they start making major repairs, then they'll start learning. They'll be like, I didn't think my truck was bad, and until I had to start paying $20,000 to keep it on the road. You know, Other owner operators have probably have warned you about that truck or that engine or something about the miles on that truck, and you ignored everything. Not until you got to the repair facility and the service manager educates you. And that education is very expensive. People talk about the expense of going to college. There's expense of going to a Freightliner. Your education begins when the money comes out of your pocket. That's how you fix stupidity. Um, I often tell guys, don't chase money. Don't change carriers for the sake of chasing money. There's better ways to make money. You can make money by investing your money. That's the best way I know how. Save your money and invest it. You can fix a lot of stupid decisions you make if you have the money. Cash is king. It's like, we're coming up on football season, okay? Now, football is a great team sport, but the offense makes a lot of mistakes. They're moving down the field and they make a lot of mistakes. Penalties everywhere, drop passes, you know, just bad play calling. But you know what? If they score the touchdown, it covers all the mistakes. And that's kind of like how cash works. Cash is king. So you can make a lot of mistakes as long as you saved your money and you have cash. So cash can fix a lot of stupid decisions you make. And I've made my share, but I gained experience by doing it. Um, but cash is like scoring touchdowns. You made a mistake. You went to Freightliner. You got a big $10,000 repair bill. As long as you got the cash, it's okay. You're going to learn from that. If you don't have the cash, now you made two bad mistakes. First mistake was you bought a piece of crap for equipment. And the second mistake is you don't have any cash to get it fixed. See, if you had the cash, you could fix the first mistake. If you don't have the cash, then you made two mistakes. And just two big mistakes can knock you out of business. Two big ones. It's like if you had a $10,000 repair one week, and then 2 weeks later you have another $10,000 repair, you're done. You don't have the money to cover two repairs. So you can't fix stupid. I've talked to literally hundreds of owner operators over the last 10 years. And the good ones keep an open mind. They do their own research. They don't take my word for anything. Generally speaking, I don't tell anybody what to do. I generally just point them in a direction. And it's up to them if they want to pursue that course of action. I don't tell them where to get their truck fixed. I don't tell them what's wrong with their truck. I don't diagnose their truck because I'm not a certified mechanic. I don't tell them what they should do financially. I make recommendations. I point them in a direction, but it's up to them. They're a small business owner just like I am. They got to put their big boy pants on and make their own decisions. I can't hold your hand. I have a business of my own to run. I know many owner operators want to contact me 24 hours a day, every single day. I told them no. It's like, I'm sorry, but I'm working just as hard as you are. I don't need two jobs, and the second job isn't paying anything. So I have one job, and I'm willing to share my experience and try to help new owner operators because I received a lot of help when I first started out. But I had to make my own decisions, and some of my decisions were stupid. Looking back on it, I'm like, that was a really bad decision. That was a stupid decision, but I had to do it. It was part of the learning process. You can't prevent somebody from failing, and failing might be the best thing for them. I know that sounds strange, but the only way they're going to learn is if they try something and they fail. If you're always there to prevent them from failing, they'll never learn to stand on their own. They'll never learn to solve the problems on their own because someone's always a text message or email or a Facebook post away that could help them, to help them think through the problem. They're not developing the problem solving skills on their own. That takes time, that takes experience. And you have to learn from your mistakes. If that means you fail, then that means you fail. But you will learn from your failures. Failing is part of being successful. How do you learn to do things right is a large part learning how to avoid doing things wrong. It's not that you're always making the right decision, but you're always avoiding the wrong decision. It's like how did you get so good at being an owner operator? I'm like, well, I paid a lot for that experience. You know, I paid for a lot of tows, a lot of breakdowns, and I paid for my mistakes. And you know, for me, I had to see it to believe it. You know, guys say don't take your truck up to 1 million miles. I took it up to 1.2 million miles. I had to see it to believe it. You know, and once I saw it, once I paid the bills, now I start understanding. Now I'm starting to think differently. You know, now I'm starting to reconsider my decisions about the truck. So a lot of times, new owner operators get attached to that truck. You know, they have this human fault that they assign personality to innate objects. you know, this is my favorite tool. This is my favorite. Car. This is I. People love their cars, right? And then that translates to their trucks. You know, they love their cars, so now they love their truck. They'll do whatever they can for their truck, and it's kind of like being stupid. It's like recognize that truck for what it is. It's a high mileage used piece of equipment. You keep throwing money in it, you're being stupid. But you can't fix stupid. Stupid has to fix itself. When they get tired of making truck repairs on a high mileage used piece of equipment, then they'll learn. They'll learn from experience. But they they can't learn any other way. They can read articles, they can watch videos, they can talk to drivers, they can talk to mechanics. But for some people, including myself, they have to learn from experience. And when they get that experience, it stings. It stings. It's like being bitten by or being stung by a bee. You know, you don't want that. It hurts. but but it's a good teacher, and that's when they learn. Uh, there's another saying that the stupid shall be punished, which means is that you know some people will not learn from others, and they'll learn from their own mistakes. And it'll cost them financially. Not only financially, but it'll cost them time. So time and money, two resources that you want to try to manage as best you can. And when people make stupid decisions, it's going to cost them time and money. But that's part of being an owner operator. Part of being a successful owner operator is learning from your own experience. And I could talk to 10 owner operators with 10 years experience, and they may each have their unique perspective, but I think they would all agree cash is king. Just like that football analogy. It's like you could call whatever plays you want. You can try trick plays. You can try the ground game. You can try the passing game. Whatever works, as long as you score a touchdown. But if you don't score that touchdown, you're going to lose. So same thing with being an owner operator. Whatever works for you, that's fine, as long as you're generating cash. But if you don't have cash, you're going to lose that game. That just comes down to that. And when we say you can't fix stupid, maybe it takes them to run out of cash before they realize what their mistakes are. The stupid shall be punished, and that means they'll take all your money. You won't have a truck, you won't have any money, and you won't be an owner operator. So keep this in mind. I know there's and a new owner operator, their head is spinning. Cash is king. Cash can correct a lot of your mistakes. You'll learn. As long as you have cash, you're still in the game. So don't go out there be spending all your money. That's what's going to give you the lifeline to pull you out of, bad decisions is your cash. You got to preserve your cash as much as you possibly can. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.